Short and sweet.
Hello folks, back in 1983 I started a weekly half-hour computer show on public radio in Germany. It was the first of its kind and very popular, not only among Commodore, Atari and Amiga users. In my studio are lots of software packages now and documentations from the 1980s, 1990s and early 2000s. Let me show you. And please beware, the items on my shelf are not in chronological order. They are in no order at all. Painter was the first software which emulated brush strokes like watercolor on the Mac. Its programmer was Mark Zimmer, who later joined Apple Computer. I purchased the software bundled with a graphics tablet. Painter makes no sense with a mouse. This is the German manual for the first Macintosh laptop computer called PowerBook. Session was an audio tool. It needed so-called Nubus cards, quite expensive back in the early 1990s. It enabled multi-track audio recording and editing. Here is Painter again, the English manual, the bundle pack with the graphics tablet. When Windows XP was released in 2001, I had already switched from the Mac computers to Windows PCs. One of the reasons was that audio editing was pretty reliable on XP, and I could do 3D computer animation on Windows. We're stepping back in time, mid-1990s, the Macintosh 7200 user manual. Here are the installation CDs for my Power Macintosh. And again Windows, this time Windows Professional 2000 from 1999. Remember, there was NT, then 2000 and then XP. The leading computer magazine in Germany and later in Europe is the CT magazine. Here is a software collection from 2005, including a virus scanning suite. In 2006 I used this software for my text declaration. It was quite a disaster. It didn't work well and it was very invasive. Bryce 3D did work out, developed by Ken Musgrave and released by Metacreations, founded by the German visual graphics artist Kai Krause. Bryce rendered single images of landscapes. It took hours. Since I could not pre-visualize the 3D scene, it was always a surprise to see the finished result the next morning. Often disappointing, always exciting. The 3D modeling and animation software Maya entered the world in 1998. Since it ran on affordable Windows machines, I purchased Maya and started a pretty sweet computer animation career. This is a beautiful book on Maya. Before Maya, there was Power Animator, often just called Alias, programmed and released by Alias in Toronto and Wavefront in Santa Barbara. It ran on Silicon Graphics computers only, with their dedicated powerful GPUs. I had an SGI-02 at that time, late 1990s. I studied 3D animation with books like these ones. In my shelf are a few CBM 64 5¼ floppies. I wrote lots of manuscripts for my radio show on the Commodore home computer from 1983 on. Adobe GoLive was one of the leading tools for creating web pages, which I did in, I think, 1999. Vocal Rider, an audio tool which sang English lyrics, sort of. Basically, it was a software synthesizer released in the late 1990s. With Nihao 1, you could try learning Mandarin. I never opened this CD box, which was sent to me for review reasons. In 2004, I flew from Cologne to Vienna to interview the team which created the Vienna Symphonic Library, a software suite for digital music production with real classical music instruments. I think Opus 1 was one of the first releases. This very well-designed box with CDs and documentation was Microsoft Expression Studio, basically for web design and graphics. I think they discontinued it pretty soon after. The German music software company Steinberg released their first string sample edition called Halion on 7 CDs. We're jumping back and forth in time. As you can see, this is a computer game console by Atari from 1989. I played Lynx with passion till the end. And then basically I could throw the hardware away. The Commodore Amiga computer was highly popular in the US, whereas the competing Atari ST with its high-resolution black and white monitor was the more popular one in Germany and parts of Europe. This is a modular programming language and compiler for the Amiga. 1983, my first ever computer, the CBM64. In Europe it was sold under the name of Commodore 64. In those days the Commodore BASIC language was very inviting. We spent so much time programming this machine with peek and poke strings with loops, print and return commands. I did a lot of on-air audio design for National Public Radio in Germany. The Sample Mania and even more the Poke in the Ear with a Sharp Stick series were my favorites. SAM, short for Semantic Antivirus for Macintosh. Early Macintosh computers were slowing down when they ran new software. That's why I ordered accelerator boards like the Railgun 030 SE, probably for my Mac SE30. It was shipped from Austin, Texas to me in Germany and pretty soon discontinued after a couple of years. Back to the Commodore 64, this was the GEOS Handbook. GEOS was an 8-bit operating system with more graphics than the DOS-like standard operating system for this machine. HyperCard was the reason for my investment in a Macintosh computer. Basically, it was an interactive graphical programming language, quite lovely. This is the manual for the original Atari ST computer, which is a database software called Ediments. Again, the CBM64 German manual from 1984. This colorful book was about understanding computer networks, published 4 years before the World Wide Web was introduced. Networking for Apple at that time was about, for example, connecting a single laser printer to all the Macs in an office. And it worked perfectly alright, and the connecting cables even were very, very costly. Again, several floppies from the mid-1980s in my shelf. The second one on the left contained my digital address book. Canoma, released in 1999 by Metacreations, not very successful 3D modeling software, I don't remember it. Deck 2, I do remember that, a very useful multi-track audio software for the Mac, developed in San Francisco, lovely. And Hyperprism, as lovely, a graphic user interface to draw sound effects on the screen, Arboretum Systems, San Francisco. I've been playing Go since I was 20 or so. This is Bruce Wilcox's Instant Go. And this is Infini-D, an audio tool for creating loops, for example drum loops. I never used Adobe SiteMill, software for creating web pages, but I did use Specular Infini-D intensely. In 1996 it was outstanding, my first encounter with 3D animation. Mac Secrets, the manual for a Nokia monitor, Rebirth, a software synthesizer, and Vocal Writer again, we've had this before. Specular created Infini-D and TextureScape. TextureScape mimicked 3D effects for 2D vector graphics. It rendered things quite fast, and I used TextureScape for some of my German public television programs. Kai Krause, when I visited him in California back in the 1990s, had released quite a few graphics tools. Goo was a big one. Later, these fun effects were implemented in programs such as Photoshop. SampleCell 2 was software and hardware on my Mac Centris computer. It did what the name says, sampling. Norton utilities for the Mac. Delrina Fax Pro. During the modem days, it was my main tool to send and receive fax messages. I never had a fax machine, but my Mac was able to handle this paperless task with Delrina Fax Pro running in the background and a modem attached to the phone landline. Myst was an innovative computer game came out in 1993. It was the time when I purchased my last Macintosh computer. Here's the user manual for Mist. Data storage was expensive, hard drives, for example. That's why I used DAT tapes to store files, digital audio tapes. The software I used was Retrospect. It worked perfectly fine. For receiving and sending fax messages for the Mac, I had to use a little box which detected whether a phone call or a fax call was coming in. With the first browsers for the web, Ethernet connections entered the scene. The D-Link Ethernet mini-hubs distributed the signals to several computers. Writing data on CD-ROMs was a new technology. Many people couldn't believe this was possible. CD recorders cost over $2,000 at the beginning. But for my radio broadcasts, this was a good investment. Of course, together with a software like the one by Plasmon or Astarte named Toast. Sounddesigner II was my main audio software. It worked in combination with the Audiomedia II sound card, long before Windows machines were handling steady audio signals well. We're talking about the late 1990s here. Monitors, of course, were heavy. Here's one dedicated to Macintosh machines. IMAX 208 was a DSL modem distributed by Deutsche Telekom. I remember an interview I did in the mid-1990s at the Deutsche Telekom headquarters in the city of Bonn, where one of the engineers told me something very big is coming, and that was DSL. All modems could be dumped. We had the first kind of fast internet technology. The computer game Mist again. And here is Notator Logic, developed by Gerhard Lengeling in Hamburg. His company then was Emagic. Before that it was called C-Lab. Gerhard later joined Apple Computer and changed the name from Emagic Notator Logic to, well, Logic Pro. This is my Atari version from 1992. Of course, I used synthesizers and needed to connect them to my PC. USB came much later. This is my Roland UA30 audio interface with USB. TextureScape again. Here is Connectic's RAM doubler for the Mac. Of course, it did not double the RAM, but it sort of organized the running software more intelligently than the Mac system did. Infini-D again, 3D modeling and animation software. And this is the manual for a modem. Speed doubler. Well, I don't know if it was worth the investment. Double the speed, sort of, maybe. This is the manual for my digital audio backup system. We talked about this earlier. And here is the Japanese edition of MS-DOS 6. Adobe PageMill, yet another tool, early tool for web design. Masterlist sort of organized audio files on the Mac. I don't remember what it exactly did. Kai's Power Tools, quite a while before Metacreation was founded by Kai. Plugins for Adobe Photoshop, very popular. Conflict Catcher was a piece of software for the Mac to find and eliminate multitasking conflicts of software. MDT, I like that program, a great tool for audio. It applied dynamic effects such as compression and was one of the first of its kind. I did not like this printer. The Epson Stylus Photo from 1997 was risky. You, in the most cases, did not get what you wanted, and the photo paper was very expensive. You see, I had different versions and upgrades of audio and animation software. Here is Adobe Premiere 4 for the Mac, video editing. It's still around. Steinberg software licensing. Steinberg from Hamburg with Cubase has been the biggest competitor of the Logic developers from Hamburg, same city. Today I compose all my music with Cubase on a Windows machine. These are just the two parts of one empty box. Avid Illusion, an early tool for compositing. That is, mixing two sources of, well, videos. We're getting closer to the end. Next on my shelf are a couple of CDs and DVDs with software. Wavelab was and still is my main audio editing and mastering tool. I did hundreds of radio things using different versions of this great program, developed in France and under the hood of Steinberg. Native Instruments complete in version 3, basically a suite of software instruments. I've used Adobe Lightroom from version 5 on for my photography for picture lines and Wikipedia. I don't use it anymore. Native Instruments is a company based in Berlin. Reaktor was their first product. Here is version 5 of Reaktor. Since Maya's strength was not exactly the animation of humans, Autodesk acquired Motion Builder, which did just that. Long before this, even before Maya came out, Alias was the software for 3D NURBS modeling and animation. And here is Melodyne. I've known Peter Neubecker for many years. He developed Melodyne, a tool for music studios to change the pitch of vocal and later all instrument tracks. A very early version of Cubase, the MIDI and audio suite. Groove Agent, a virtual drummer, must have been around the year 2000. Michael Kurtz from Native Instruments programmed a virtual Hammond organ. I love this instrument. Battery lets you program drum sequences, it still does. Microsoft Word 98, the Mac edition. I had Word on my Mac, but I never opened this manual. Ableton Live, a music software for basically live performance. Click and Translate, software for more or less automatic translation of texts, very early. A plugin for the audio software Reason called Abbey Road Keyboards. The shelf is basically empty. Thanks for watching.